The NBA and NFL dominate the sports media industry in North America, specifically when we look at how players lean into their personality for the spotlight. But what I didn't think about is that the NHL, for example, has a deep-rooted culture that actually shies away from things like social media.
In hockey specific, I find, and I don't think there's really any other sport, just in terms of what the norm is, very limited in content for NHL players. And I think it's more of the culture of, hey, this is a team sport, it's not an individual sport.
So I sat down with Sean Coffey.
Hi everyone.
An NHLPA certified agent at Quartexx Hockey Management, to get the inside look at the NHL culture when it comes to social media, personal branding, life after sport, and even stories about Patrice Bergeron, Sidney Crosby, Austin Matthews, Spittin' Chicklets, and more. But before we get to the interview, I want to introduce you to this series sponsor, FireWork. FireWork is an NIL marketplace that brings like-minded athletes and brands together to form dream partnerships and marketing campaigns. Did you know that athletes drive 3 times more engagement in sponsored content than traditional influencers? Just like Undress the Jersey, FireWork was started to shine a light on athletes and bring their wonderful personalities to the forefront. FireWork has athletes earning 2 times more from sponsorships after sign up, and drives positive ROI campaigns for brands by connecting you with the right partners. Find your dream partnership by visiting the link at the top of the description of this video, and head to www.thefirework.app to create a free profile today. Now, back to the episode.
I developed a passion for marketing and branding back at Boston Globe Media Partners. So real quick, out of college, I actually got a job in management consulting, which was a great job. Like, I was super pumped to kind of start that next chapter. And it was really an MBA for me in terms of being young, but interfacing with high level executives. And I didn't know anything at the time. And it's one of the few that didn't get promoted to senior associate after 2 years. So I'm like, geez, I might have a hard time climbing this ladder. And so I had a mentor from Babson who took over as the chief revenue officer at the Globe. And honestly, he could have told me to go sell papers outside of the train station downtown, and I would have said yes. But this job involved helping start the Boston Globe's content lab, sponsored content studio.
Okay.
And so I was seeing, this was at the time where the Patriots and Red Sox were winning, championships one year after another. And it was a pretty lucrative job at the time, just because all of these big brands, the JetBlues, Dunkin' Donuts, Verizon's, were investing so much money to align, even on a back page print ad. I didn't have to sell that. It just, hey, what do you want? So I wanted to kind of take that next step at the convergence of sports and media, and ended up applying to an open position, director level role at Spartan Race. And so we worked with, sponsors there, licensing, and also, there was a Spartan Pro Team, we called it, which was really a network of the most elite obstacle course racers that we had access to. And, we strategized around how we could commercialize the influence of these athletes relative to the broader community of endurance athletes. And so I was seeing, these men and women, help themselves by producing content, letting people under the hood, garner a following, and then I'd be able to, sell an influencer deal and bring it to them. And so I'm like, geez, if they can do it, if they can get, 75 grand from Bose to be the official headphone of the Spartan Pro Team, why can't some of these hockey players I know kind of get in the mix and start sharing these economics? Exactly. I was probably a little naive at the time, because I maybe wasn't as mindful of, like you mentioned, the culture, the difficulty in game schedule, the highs and lows, and I'm sure we can get into that. But that's really where the passion came from, and that was my foray back into hockey itself.
Now, first, I just want to add that I come from a basketball background, and even though I grew up in a small hockey town in Nova Scotia, I don't even think I know how to tie a pair of skates, let alone get on the ice. So naturally, I wanted to compare the NBA's relationship with the media versus the NHL.
Historically, the only marketing deals that NHL players were getting in the last decade would be, memorabilia, trading cards, equipment. Those are kind of the low-hanging fruit. that maybe a star player would expect.
That's right.
I think the big issues has lied in the fact that, number one, the schedule, the game schedule, there's 82 games. There's media. If you're in a big market like Toronto, the media attention there, if guys are on a losing streak, they want to hide. And, you know, if you're in a market where there's less eyeballs, less media attention, that might make for a more comfortable environment in terms of putting stuff out there. But then again, do people care as much? So where is the sweet spot, even from a geography or market standpoint? I'm not sure. And maybe there is a changing of the guard from a locker room standpoint. The league continues to get younger, but at the end of the day, managers, coaches, scouts, even going through the draft process, like there's a perception out there where, do you want to be the player going into a draft interview and they're asking about your YouTube channel? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a fair question to ask.
It's one of the most important questions that I want to get out of this, is because I, as a basketball player, look at the NBA, and I think I would argue that NBA players, they have such a platform. Like I would say that the NBA is so big is because of the individual players have personalities. They express that personalities, whether it's the tunnel pictures of their outfits. These players have massive, massive audiences that are global. Now, talking about like YouTube channel and, you know, getting interviewed about their specific stuff, I understand that, because at the end of the day, these players are paid millions of dollars to perform on the ice, not to be celebrities. Why do you think there's such a contrast between the NBA and like the NHL, for example?
Well, I think part of it has to do with how the leagues are set up. It's interesting because when I was before I joined the hockey agency, I was doing some project-based work for the teams that were managing the business or marketing affairs for guys like Julian Edelman and Tom Brady, and so I was able to get a look at just how the players were receptive to, you know, these opportunities, you know, and then I remember my talking points that I'd always fall back on at the time. Okay, LeBron James has more followers than, you know, his team and league combined. And I don't know what those numbers look now. So if you look at the influence that the athlete has as opposed to the league, I mean, LeBron James could start his own professional basketball league right now, and the NBA would have issues. So they have so much leverage, so much power. When you're in that position, why not capitalize on it?
So that makes me think, like, do you think the NHL doesn't want the players to have more influence than them?
No, I don't think it's a conscious effort. I think they're smart people at the league and working for the clubs, but I think the NBA has, you know, there is more personality, right? There's more flair. There's less players on a team, you know, so it's a comfortable environment. Whereas I think in the NHL, or just in hockey in general, you know, the players sacrifice so much at a young age to get there. So it's real. If you think about it, it's the only sport where at 14 or 15, many of these guys are leaving home. That's right. You're not staying with your mom and dad and going to high school and then going to college. Like that would be I think everyone would love that, but it's not the reality. Because of that, you have to be so singularly focused on the one thing. And so, you know, a lot of times when we're speaking with young players and their families, you know, we're not talking about what we can do for you from a marketing perspective. We're talking about how we can help you become a better hockey player.
That's right. So clearly it's in the NHL's culture to prioritize the game and team over anything else. However, there are still some guys in the league that lean into their personality and share that with the world. Now, Spittin' Chicklets is one of the biggest sports podcasts in the world, and that's ran by two former NHL players. So I wanted to get Sean's opinion on how he thinks that podcast has shifted the culture in hockey. But two, when I look at someone like Sidney Crosby, one of the greatest to ever play, I'm so confused as why he doesn't want to leverage that and build a community online. The guy doesn't even have Instagram. But I brought this up to Sean, and he explained it in such a clear way that makes total sense. Like, I look at Austin Matthews and his influence. He kind of accepts that celebrity life in terms of like hanging out with Justin Bieber and like, you know, being the big Toronto Maple Leafs. Tyler Seguin is another guy from the Dallas Stars who's like, I've seen a bunch of YouTube videos on him showing off his tattoo. So it is there. But I think of like some of the biggest guys in the league, like Sidney Crosby, and he doesn't even have an Instagram account.
Yep. I mean, this guy behind me right here is Jersey, Patrice Bergeron,
Right.
Hall of Famer, an idol of mine growing up in Boston, and fortunate enough to service him as a client in a small capacity. But yeah, no Instagram. I mean, when I first started working with one of the managing directors at the firm at the time, Kent Hughes, who's now the general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. I remember one of our first conversations I was very transparent, like, hey, I want to get Patrice on social media. That was like a goal. And that goes back to maybe how I was a little bit naive. Like, he's a little bit older. He's had so much success, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But this was a time where you could have said the same thing about Tom Brady as he was approaching 37, 38 years old. And then all of a sudden he's a social media powerhouse.
Guys on TikTok doing trends with his daughter and stuff. To bring it back to Patrice, what value did you think you could provide him as a client if he was on social media? And what did Kent Hughes think about that? Did he look at you like you had 5 heads? Like, no, we're not doing this?
No, I think, Kent was able to teach me a lot about marketing as it relates to hockey, because I was coming at it from, like I said, these Spartan race athletes, NFL athletes that I had seen. And, he had great experience working with US Olympians from the women's team and national deals leading up to the Olympics. And he's had clients like Patrice or Vinny LeCavalier, but Crosby probably fits in the same category as Patrice. Like when they came into the league in 2004, 2005, 2006, there wasn't social media.
Right.
Like, so we forget that, how new it is. So you get to a point in your career where you're established. What's the reason for change? Like, people need a reason to change or to bring something new into their program.
That's right.
And if you have a recipe for success, maybe you want to stick with it. You don't want to have a call once a week with a social media manager to plan out your content. Sure. Especially if you've made, $50-100 million over the career. And again, it's very regional. Like, hockey doesn't have the same mass appeal as the other sports. So when we're trying to service our clients from a marketing standpoint, if they're interested, there's going to be a small percentage of NHL players that, if they have an online presence, that, then they might have an opportunity for a national partnership. But a lot of times it's regional, in market, and again, depending on the market. Like Michael Bunting is a client that plays for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He had played in Arizona, had a great year in Toronto, and he wanted to use this past season as an opportunity to get out there a little bit, tell his story. Just a kid from Scarborough kind of became like that tagline for him. But at the same time, he's playing in Toronto. He's on a young team. He has a young general manager. So that environment is conducive to creating that comfort to, hey, I'm going to be okay with this Instagram post. Because a lot of times you'll do a marketing deal and they're not huge numbers, but okay, well, now we need to deliver something for the brand. We owe them these posts, but hey, maybe I was healthy scratch the game before, or our team's lost 7 games in a row. I'm going to be ducking for cover. I'm going to get, heat for this in the comments. And whereas in football, where you're playing one game every week, if you get blown out on Sunday, you could be playing on, I don't know, who's the worst team in the NFL. The fans still show up. So by Wednesday, they forgot.
So my question, this leads me to look at one of the number 1 podcasts in the world, especially in the sports world, is Spittin' Chicklets.
Yep.
I'm not an avid listener. I've listened to a few episodes. I watch a lot of the clips because of the personalities on the show with Biz and Whitney.
Yep.
I'm curious to know whether or not you felt a difference before Spittin' Chicklets blew up and after. Did it shift hockey culture? Did it increase viewership? Did it wake people up of the opportunities that could come from creating an audience online? Because now we see Biz on panels with TNT, I think, sitting next to Wayne Gretzky. And Wayne Gretzky was like, I'm pretty sure I came across an article saying that his son was like, Dad, you need to go on the show because Biz Nasty's on it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what has this done for hockey culture in general?
No, that's a great point. I think it's been massive. You know, we've had clients on that podcast, and those guys have been awesome for the sport and creating an environment that's light for the guests of the show to not only come on and tell their story, make a few jokes, but allow the fans to see some of these younger players coming up and their personalities and
That's
drive
right.
them to their social media
On
account.
top of that, if you want to talk about life after sport, look at these guys that are no longer in the league. They've started creating an audience strictly based on sharing stories from their career as an athlete, which I believe fans and people that like the sport, all they want is access to the lives and the lifestyle that professional athletes and their favorite players are living, right? That's what the Kardashians do. That's what the Ball family did on Facebook. I'm even looking at Scotty Barnes of the Toronto Raptors. 2 weeks ago, he just launched a YouTube channel where it's the vlog style. And here I am late at night binge watching his vlogs because it's like summertime training. He's in Las Vegas. He's in LA at all these runs. He's going shopping. It's like the more access that you can provide to your fans, the better. Right?
Well, it's funny because I remember me and my brother growing up, obviously huge NHL fans. And so pre-internet, you know, VHS days. And there was this series, I think it was called like NHL Ice, NHL All Access 24/7. But it was, you know, you had to go to a Blockbuster to get these like 30 or 60-minute long behind the scenes look of the teams in the league in the 90s.
Yep.
Used to just binge watch this to see how guys were in the locker room or, you know, at their house with their families, to see them off the ice. And it's, you know, today it's right at your fingertips. And I, you know, I do want to give credit to the league and the clubs and their investment in helping these athletes, you know, support their brand. And, you know, now there are teams in the league where they will have a photographer, you know, in the hallway, you know, the walk-off, the off-the-bus walk-off, you know, they'll capture that content. I think they're using Greenfly. For that, we're using Open Doors to, you know, automate the distribution of that content to the player's account for them to, you know, decide whether or not to post. So
it's happening.
I think the league sees it. The league understands that the league will grow on the backs of players' brands, and that's who's going to be capturing the attention of the audience and getting everyone's, you know, interest.
Bringing it back to Spit and Chicklets, simply by just sharing stories of what they've been through and what they've done has allowed them to like launch products like we see their Pink Whitney drink, their alcohol brand explode, and now they're probably making a lot more money now than they did as a player. So I think content is a great opportunity to prepare yourself for life after sport. And it's something that you can do as you're still playing the sport.
And I think the lesson with those two guys specifically is, and we've talked about this on the Next Shift podcast, was, you know, one of the themes was always like owning your story. You know, that's what differentiates you. Your story through sport is your resume. Correct. So I don't care if you're like me, never made it, colossal failure from a sports standpoint. It took me a while to reconcile and make sense of, well, what do I have to offer even the hockey community, the world?
Correct.
Well, it's my experience. And that's right. And so I think, but you know, those two guys are so comfortable with their story. Bissonnette is self-deprecating as they come, and Ryan Whitney, same thing. So they're relatable in that sense. So when you're posting online, it's just be you. You don't have to make it up. And right. But I do think the other benefit, because I remember Ryan Whitney's brother Sean is a good friend of mine, and I remember being at his wedding a couple summers ago, and Whit was saying, "Oh, I don't really have an Instagram. You know, I don't want people following me." I'm like, "Well, you don't need to, because you have 500,000 people listening to you every week." So I think there's something to be said too, where if you're not comfortable, you know, owning and operating your own channel, so to speak, having another degree of separation. Like, I don't know what the future of the Next Shift podcast is, but it made me comfortable saying, well, hey, I'm not putting the camera towards me saying, hey guys, you know, this way for breakfast. It was a very strategic property separate from myself, where I could still give my opinion and kind of produce my own, create and produce my own content.
I'm going to leave you with Sean's advice for athletes who are still fortunate enough to play the game that they love. Sean and I both believe that content has the ability to make your transition out of sport a whole lot easier, because the reality is every athlete is going to have to navigate that transition at some point in their life.
I think advice to players that are still playing, whether they make it or not, I mean, regret is a terrible thing to have. So, make sure that you're, number one, you're grateful that you get to play hockey every day and putting your best foot forward, because one day it will end. Never lose sight of that, because as hard as it is, you're so lucky to be able to play at any level. Number two, I think during that transition period when the writing is on the wall, your career might be coming to an end, or even before it is, don't be afraid to go through those, exercise of figuring out what lights you up outside of the game, and it could be things that help drive you as an athlete, whether that's mind, psychology, nutrition, fitness. So what are those interests that might, again, like drive the ultimate passion, which is the sport?
Yep.
Because I think that's a great way to start. I mean, if you look at some of these clips that are circulating on Instagram about Kobe Bryant, like, you can tell he was a master at discipline, a master at, setting goals. Like, that's not hockey. That's not a sport. That's a life skill.
Yep.
So I always find that, sports are really just like a mirror into how you're operating as a human. So make sure you've got that all taken care of. And then, in finding out what's next, as when the playing career is over, obviously, like we talked about, having an audience at your fingertips could be supremely helpful. Like, if your wife one day wants to start a clothing company, well, what I would give for 100,000 Instagram followers, right? Or, God forbid, you need to raise money for a cause. And then lastly, and I can speak from personal experiences, surround yourself with awesome people and, focus on the process. I think that's what I've done. Like, there's great people, great mentors around me every day that, are teaching me and bringing me along. And so when you're in that type of environment, it really frees you up to do the work and not look ahead. And just to tie it back one last time, I find that if an athlete is producing content, the one thing it does kind of help them do at a subconscious level is like keep them in the moment. How social media and content development can highlight the process that you're in and maybe be the thing that keeps you grounded in that process. And there's actually, I think, a practical benefit to kids, younger athletes, like posting online, posting and branding yourself and letting people into all the work that you do in the off season or how you approach your day to day as an athlete. I think the practical benefit comes in is because in order to post, in order to get over that fear of, oh, what are people going to think? I think it's an exercise in like self-discovery, not to get too philosophical, but I know from my own personal standpoint, like everyone and their mothers during COVID, I started a podcast with my college roommate who was an All-American, and we did 100-something episodes every week for 2 years. And I think I grew a lot from doing that. Not only was I able to kind of flush out ideas and talking to people and posting it online, but branding myself and letting people consume me in a certain way. And you have to not care what people think, because what's this Coffey guy doing putting out a podcast?
And one of the things that I love most about creating content is the idea of me watching back what I produce in 20, 30 years, because it's now become, for me, it's become like a digital journal, a digital diary for me.
It's so funny because I said this to my wife the other day, because if I never produce another tweet, which I don't really tweet, but at least I have 100-something episodes of this podcast that my kids or grandkids, maybe that's vanity speaking, but I don't think it is, because I said to my wife, imagine if my grandfather had a podcast that I came across one day, and like that would be incredible.
Just to see how they speak and how they view the world, and for players to have footage of you on the team bus or the plane or in the locker room, all these different, whether you share it or not, I think documenting your journey as a human being is beyond powerful, and you'll be thankful that you did that 20 years down the line.
And the last thing I'll say, it doesn't have to be just you, find people that you trust, find a partner. And that's what we try to do. We have great people that we've worked with. I obviously try to be a subject matter expert for Quartexx. But, whether that's our partners at August Icon Marketing or other people that we've come across over the years that are looking to help athletes, like it's not set it and forget it. There needs to be a level of investment and time and energy from the athlete themselves, of course, but there's resources out there that can help you along the way.
That's right. So if you're listening to this, go check out what Quartexx is doing over there. They're supporting their athletes in a way that is more than just the game of hockey. Sean, it's been incredible to pick your brain about the hockey world, because as a basketball player, I'm very far removed from it, but I learned a ton.
Same.
I hope the audience listening has learned a ton, and just wanted to give you your flowers and say that I think you're the best person to be in the position that you are, because you clearly carry yourself in a professional manner. And I know that carries all over to your clients as well.
Appreciate that, Tristen. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
We'll be in touch. But that's awesome. That's it for this episode with Sean Coffey. This is the Athlete Creator signing off. See you later.